A very good evening to all the task members. This is our 11th presentation of our Facebook Live challenge. It was started a month back when there was very big panic of corona in all the members. There were presentations of corona, there were webinars for corona all around, and everybody was scared of corona at that time. So we decided to go for non-corona topics, and I believe all of you must have enjoyed all these presentations. We are starting a new series of case presentation by PGs next month. It will be a case presentation by PG in front of some e-gurus, and they will guide them how to present the things, then how to answer the questions from teachers, and all these things will be discussed. So I hope it will be also a very good series, and I believe you all will enjoy it. Today's topic is very important topic in corona era. It is spirituality of caregiving. It is basically about palliative care, and Dr. Abhijit Dam, who is going to speak on it, is a palliative care physician. I believe all of us know him. He doesn't require an introduction. He's doing wonderful work in Koshish, that is a hospices. He's treating the patients who are poor, who cannot afford palliative care in hospices. If you have seen Abhijit sir's Facebook wall, you will see, and even during this presentation, you will see which type of patient he is treating in these hospices. He is postgraduate from AIMS, that is the most prestigious institute for postgraduate in our country. He could have done job in US or UK or in any other country and earn a lot and spent a very good life with good cars and good bungalows and all that. But he decided to stay in India and serve the people of India. He is truly a saint, and I believe he will guide us to treat our patient in a better way. Even in corona patient, in certain group of patient, it is more of a palliative care. So we will learn lots of things from this presentation. So I request Abhijit sir for this presentation. Basically, there were lots of problems because of internet issue in the area because of the current weather condition in that area. So Abhijit sir recorded this presentation and sent to me so that everybody can listen to it at time. Abhijit sir had to record it 5 times. It is a 40 minutes presentation and he had to record it for 5 times. So he literally spent entire day, yesterday entire day for this presentation to make it a proper presentation for us because of there were some recording issue. He had to record it for 5 times. So I thank you, Abhijit. I thank Dr. Abhijit sir for giving his precious time for all of us. So I will start the presentation now. Thank you, Abhijit sir. Thank you very much.
Well, hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of webinar. We had quite a few issues in recording, and Hetal knows about it. But anyway, well, in this difficult times of the lockdown, I chose a topic which is slightly off the regular track, in the off-beaten track. But then the topic which I've chosen has a lot of commonality. It has something which involves all of us, because unless there is something which involves all of us, will not be interested. All of us cannot be interested. But because see, in our everyday lives, we seek commonality everywhere in all spheres of life. Say you're traveling on a train, and then you find out the person sitting next to you is actually from the same place as you are, and say he's from Ahmedabad. and you find out, अरे तुम भी अहमदाबाद के, and then you will say, अरे तुम गुजराती भी हो. So that promotes a bonding. So human beings are bound by commonalities, right? Everywhere in all spheres of life, you see the commonality is exploited in many spheres as well, in the basis of religion, caste, from the state you belong, from the nationality, etc., etc., So commonality is the thing which binds us. So today we'll discuss something about caregiving and the spirituality of caregiving. So before entering the discussion, again coming back to commonality, so there are basically two types of commonalities which bind us, right? And these two type of commonalities are beyond the so-called man-made things of caste, creed, sex or whatever. So these commonalities bind us. Now this is the picture of an oyster, and deep within the wombs of the oyster you can see that beautiful pearl, which is a very precious stone. Have you ever wondered how a pearl is formed deep in the wombs of the oyster? Well, the oyster has to be wounded. You have to inflict a wound deep down in the wombs of the oyster, right? And that wound causes suffering. So the oyster suffers actually, and this beautiful oyster, which is one of the greatest gurus, it transforms its suffering into something so beautiful, so expensive, so meaningful, and that is the pearl. So dear friends, the first commonality which binds all of us is suffering, because I don't think that there is anybody who has not suffered. Adi Guru Shankaracharya actually had said that we are born in this world of Maya to suffer. So suffering is a innate human nature. You have to suffer. Now the mighty Lord leaves it upon to the human beings to make a sense out of their suffering. So all of us are suffering, but then some people are successful, some are not, because those successful people have transformed their suffering into something very meaningful. They have made a sense of meaning out of their suffering, and that is why they evolve. By being successful, I don't mind just material success, right? Material success is one of the very mundane things, because the poorest men have nothing but wealth. So it is like that. So materialistic acquisitions are not a measure of your success. So one has to be very clear about it, and as you grow older, you will realize the value of what I say. So the oyster remains one of our greatest teachers. Now, what is suffering? Suffering is basically our agony at losing our hopes and expectations. See, expectations, asha, is one of the greatest causes of suffering, is the root cause of suffering rather. And as I say, the good Lord blesses us not with happiness. The good Lord blesses us by giving us challenges, by giving us suffering, because that is the challenge which God gives us, and it leaves it upon us to evolve, to get out of that suffering. So it is up to the human beings how the human beings will get out of that suffering. But then we are constantly expecting. This expectation is the root cause of sorrow. So because we expect, and when our expectations are not fulfilled, then we get sorrow. We expect that our children will look after us when we grow old, that our children will respect us, and when that does not happen, then we start suffering. So what was the root cause of suffering? Your own expectations. It was not the child who caused your suffering, it was your own expectations, your mind, Your mind, which convened up all those expectations, and as a result, you're suffering. As simple as that. Being forced to relinquish control, like in this COVID pandemic, you were forced to relinquish your control because you were forced to stay indoors, something which you did not like. You were forced to do so many things which you did not like. You were forced to do jhadu pocha, you were forced to cook at times, right? So, this is for men, of course. I'm not saying that jhadu pocha is a bad thing, but then, yeah, you were forced to do something which you did not like, and that would definitely come up as a challenge and cause some degree of suffering. Feeling vulnerable, helpless, and powerless against the undesired change and loss. That is all suffering. So, suffering was the first commonality which binds us. And the second commonality, we'll talk about it. Rosalind Carter, she said that there are basically only four kinds of people in this whole world. The first group are those who have been caregivers at some point of time, right? The second group are those who are currently caregivers. The third group are those who will be caregivers. And the fourth group are those who will need caregiving. Now, if you reflect back, you will definitely fit into one of these four groups. There is no way that you cannot fit into one of these four groups. So, caregiving is the second commonality which binds us. So, the first commonality which binds us is suffering, because all of us suffer. And the second commonality which binds us is caregiving, is the very process of caregiving. Now, because you need to understand that the existential or spiritual domain is an important determinant of quality of life. So, whenever we are faced with our deepest crisis in life, be it in the form of suffering because of expectations, or be it in the form of the caregiving process, because the caregiving process also brings in some degree of suffering also, right? At those times, those difficult times, we seek support in the form of spiritual or religious issues, right? Now, good palliative care, they say, you have to be high on touch and low on tech. See, but you would be aware from all the discussions which take place in your routine clinical work, or even in these webinars and all that which is going on, the focus usually remains on high tech. How you can be high tech by monitoring this parameter, that parameter, and how can you make sense of a graph, and where the upstroke is going and downstroke, and this notch and this and that. You don't look at the patient. You just don't look at the patient. You are just focusing on the monitor. You're playing with the monitor. You have become a technician. You have stopped being a physician. You are a treater. You have stopped being a healer. It is the reverse. Patients don't want you to look at monitors. Patients are not exactly always impressed by your high gimmicks. What they want is compassion. They want your presence, your dedicated, persistent presence by their side, comforting them, explaining to them in simple language, and reassuring them. That is the most important thing. Because when the patient comes in, he is scared. Believe me, he is scared. He doesn't realize what is going on. You need to reassure him. He becomes a little child. So just like a parent, just like a doting parent, you have to reassure the little children. Actions associated with compassion are attending to those little things, those small things, small acts of kindness, like, asking a patient to come in, greeting him just by getting up from your chair, just a little bit, addressing him by his name, giving him a seat, giving him a glass of water, helping him with small things, just assisting him through a corridor. These little acts of kindness leave behind a mark in the minds of the patients. And then there is something called a therapeutic inaction, which is giving others the gift of quiet time and space. Not always your patient would like to speak, and especially if you are dealing with a terminally ill patient. The terminally ill patient wants your presence, definitely. But it doesn't, that patient does not expect you to always be doing something. The patient is scared. The patient expects that you would be there for the patient. So even if you go to visit a patient and you think there is nothing much to do, it's fine. You can't always keep doing things. Every time you go to visit a patient, it's not necessary that you have to do some intervention or give some new medications. No. Just your visit to the patient matters a lot for the patient, and not only for the patient but also for the caregiver of the patient. Your visible, persistent and dedicated presence means a lot. And if you see this little child, who is sleeping in the picture in the prone position. So this photograph was taken a long time back, and there was some procedure going on in his lower limb. He was given a regional block under sedation with ketamine and midazolam. But the duration of surgery had prolonged, and the child had woken up. And I spent the time talking to the child, gently patting his back and ruffling his hair. And then I gave him this little doll. And you can see his expression, a expression of calmness and serenity. So that is what I call high on touch and low on tech. I am not running after dexmedetomidine or sevoflurane or this ETCO2 values and this and that. No. You need to look at the patient, interact with the patient, bond with the patient. This photograph depicts a seemingly very simple thing. But believe me, this is one of the most difficult things to do, because feeding an elderly is a challenge. And especially if the elderly is demented, it is a greater challenge. It is even more difficult than feeding a little child. It can take close to 20 to 30 minutes just to feed an elderly person. And imagine doing that 4 times a day, and then preparing the meal, feeding, and then cleaning up. It takes time. So these are acts which stresses the caregiver to quite an extent, and doing it 24/7 and continuously. Then there is something during the caregiving process which is called the patient healer archetype. This unfortunately is activated in both the patient and caregiver, and it is unavoidable. There is something called transference and counter transference. Now suppose I am the caregiver for my father, who is now bedridden, right? So now my father, who is bedridden, he does something called transference onto me, because he, after all, is my father. He is on a much senior level, both culturally, socially, etc., physically also. He is at a more senior level, so he thinks that he is in a more commanding position, and he transfers those feelings to me, right? So this is called transference, the process by which a patient displaces onto the caregiver feelings and ideas which derive from previous figures in his life. And then there is something called counter transference, that is the feelings that I transfer to my father, me being the caregiver. Now suppose I have had a very difficult childhood, with a lot of fights with my father and all. So there would be a lot of pent up anger and frustration within me, which I might now be transferring consciously or unconsciously to my father. So this is counter transference, which is the caregiver's transference on his patient, both as an unconscious anti-therapeutic product of the caregiver's early life as a reaction to the patient's transference. It can be demonstrated as avoidance, task-centeredness, aggression, development of chronic niceness and survivor guilt. Chronic niceness, you must have met, there are so many people who would, the moment they meet you, they say, "Oh, good morning, and how are you today? You look so lovely today." They don't mean a word of it, but they are the chronically nice people. You can't get within. You can't break the shell of these people. They come to you wearing a apron of a protective apron. They do not want you to peep within them. The saddest person is often the most jovial person. A person who laughs a lot perhaps is very sad inside. So they use that laughter as an apron, as a shield, so that they don't want you to see what is within. But the art actually lies in finding out what lies within. So this was taken during one of our home visits at Calcutta a long time back, and as you can see, the lady sitting on the right side, she is the patient, and the bare-chested man with folded arms, he is the husband. Now, early in their heydays, the woman was a very bossy character, and she used to literally dominate her husband. But now she has become bedridden, and her husband has become her primary caregiver. And now the caregiving process is intercepted with periods of anger, outbursts of anger, and frustrations, etc., because the process of counter transference was taking place. So here we gently sort of try to sort the things out, talk to both the lady and her husband, and try to sort things out to the best possible outcome. And then there is something which is called the wounded healer. All of us have, as I said, have undergone suffering, and only when we realize that how suffering is and what is the physical experience of suffering, not only the physical but also the emotional experience of suffering, can we realize how it feels to suffer. So it is his own hurt that gives the measure of his power to heal. Only the wounded physician heals, but when the doctor wears his personality like a coat of armor, he has absolutely no effect. So, in order to actually understand suffering, we have to experience suffering. This gentleman, as you see, he was recently married. In spite of the huge wound, huge growth on his chin, he married hardly less than a year back. And then one day he walked into my clinic with his bandaged chin, along with his newlywed wife, who was decked up in saris and a lot of bangles and everything. Both of them sat down at the desk, and the moment he took his dressing out, immediately 3 or 4 maggots from the wound actually fell on the desktop, and they started crawling on the desktop. One look at that, and his newlywed wife got up screaming and ran out of the room. And the moment I tried to get up to sort of interfere and pacify her, this young patient, he said, "Doctor साहब रहने दीजिए, मुझे पता है कैसा लगता है, उसको बहुत ख़राब लग रहा होगा." And then I left it, because this man at that point of time was my guru. He taught me something. He taught me the value of suffering and understanding suffering, and he was the wounded healer. So this is what is suffering. I'll give you one more example. Almost 10 years, 12 years back, I had been to the Himalayas to explore spirituality, death, dying, and all. You need to be crazy once in a while. So while returning back, it was night, almost 11:30, and I was standing at Haridwar railway station. It was very crowded, the platform. There was hardly any space. And I was standing out there, and there was this beggar who was begging for alms. And when he came to me, I just brushed him aside. And then I noticed that this lady who was sitting on the platform floor, she was sitting with a little bundle of clothes which are tied by a rope. And one look at her, you'd know that she's from a very low economic background. And the beggar also realized that, and he actually did not go to her to beg. He started to turn away. And this lady, she called out to the beggar, and she opened her sari ka pallu, which had a knot with some money in it. She opened up her sari ka pallu and took out a 10 rupee note. This was 10 years back. 10 rupees still has a value today. Took out a 10 rupee note and gave it to the beggar. And my jaw literally dropped open. And then I realized that this was another teacher. because this was a wounded healer. They understood the value of poverty, and she could correlate what poverty was, and that is why, being a wounded healer, she was doing what she could. Now, caregiving, the process of caregiving can be very stressful. Caregivers have higher prevalence of osteoarthritis, hypertension, obesity, and activity limitation. Stressed caregivers are at increased risk of poor physical and psychological health outcomes. And the time devoted to caregiving can affect your financial stability, it can affect your employment opportunities and availability for other relationships. See, because you are literally bound, no? Your whole life is centered around the caregiving process. How, what time will you get up, and then you have to cook, and then you have to clean up, then you have to give the feed, then again you have to clean up, then you have to change the diapers, then you have to give a wash to the patient, and so on and so forth. And then you have to look after your own family as well. So these caregivers can experience what you call as role captivity, because their whole life is like a clockwork. There is nothing beyond that clockwork. So they are captivated in that clockwork frame. Believe me, it is awful. And that leads to generation of a lot of anger, frustration, a feeling of guilt, etc., which is basically burnout. Now you see this young gentleman who is carrying his 2 kids. This man is a wily fellow, he never bothers about his kids. He is just romping around the village, doing this, doing that. But that day when we went to the village to distribute saris for the ladies of the village, so his wife, who normally used to look after his kids, was forced to stand in a queue for getting the sari. And at that point of time, it was upon, she told her husband that you better take care of the kids now. And see, this guy literally has his hands full. The kids, from their expression, see, the lady is looking towards her husband, and the kids, if you notice their expression, they are in no way happy to be in their father's arms. They want to go back to the mother, because the father has never done that before. So they are more comfortable with their mother. They want to go back to the mother, but now a sudden reversal of roles, and this is role captivity. As I said, he is literally captivated in his current role. There is no way he can get out of it. And imagine if he has to do this 24/7 forever, he would go mad. Another example where this young lad with CA rectum, and now his mother is acting as the caregiver. Often in most families, it is left to the onus of the ladies of the household to do the caregiving. It is sort of a unsaid rule. Yeah, if there is an elderly in the home, कौन देखेगा? वो उसकी माँ देखेगी या बहू देखेगी, whatever it is. So the ladies of the house are usually have to do the caregiving role, and when the lady is a professional, as all of you female anesthetists in this group are, you can understand how difficult things become, because not only you have to do the caregiving process, you have to fulfill your social and cultural obligations, and then you have to look after your family, your children, and then there is a professional front. Life is very difficult. It becomes a whirlwind. Have you ever tried cooking in a chula using firewood? Believe me, it's very difficult. It's a very difficult job, because there's a lot of smoke which is generated, and the worst part is in those smoky, dark, dingy interiors, you can hardly see what is cooking, what is the color, what you are putting in, and the intensity of the heat keeps changing, and because you have to adjust the fire logs to keep the intensity of heat the same. So it's a very tricky business. So the next time you are offered food which is cooked out of a wooden chulha, please do take some time out and show your gratitude to the cook. It makes a lot of difference. Another extreme example of caregiving. This elderly couple we found during one of our home visits in the Purulia district of West Bengal. You can see the ladies who are standing around and the kids and all. They are just the onlookers. They do not belong to this family. It is just because our team had gone there, these curious onlookers have come. So basically, that elderly man sitting on the charpai and his wife sitting on the second charpai they live alone. The elderly gentleman has been blind since the last 2 years, and his wife is a cripple. She cannot walk. Now, what happens? Till about 2 years back, the husband used to literally pick up the wife and help her to go to the washroom and all. Washroom means go to the fields for relieving herself. But now, because he is totally blind, he can't even do that because he doesn't know where to look for. His wife tries to guide him, but then he doesn't understand. Many a times, both of them have fallen down in the process. And so now, what this elderly lady does, see, she's sitting on the charpai which has large holes. She just lifts up her sari and relieves herself through those large holes of the charpai onto the ground. So the next time you ever use your washroom, be grateful because you have a clean washroom, you have access to water, you have a good commode, you have a flush, right? So be grateful. And what I have noticed are that the livestock, the cows, the buffaloes, the pigs, the dogs, the hens, they perceive a quietness of the mind, and they come and sit around the elderly persons who are sitting alone in the villages, because the elderly have nobody to come and talk to them. But these animals sense the quietness of their mind and they come and sit around the elderly. Now, if you have a pet dog or a cat at home, you would notice that when the whole family is sitting, the cat or dog tends to come and sit down next to the person whose mind at that point of time is the quietest, because they can perceive the quietening of the vibrations of the mind. They can perceive, because all of us give out vibrations, vibes as you call it, positive vibes or negative vibes. Yeah, it is true. Actually, we do give out vibrations. Whenever we enter a room, or many times you would look at a person and you would not want to go and talk to that person, because that person is emitting some negative sort of vibrations which you can perceive, but we are not mindful of those things. So as I say, miracles do happen all the time. You just have to be mindful about it. So caregiver burnout, continuously doing this job of caregiving 24/7 on and on, can result in dread, tension, irritability, anger, etc. And this is often a precursor to major depressive disorder. So early detection is important, and this is very common, mainly in the rural settings, but also in the urban settings nowadays. That is the eldest daughter, not the son. The sons are basically useless. So the eldest daughter of the family is given the role of the caregiver to look after the younger siblings. Right? So the caregiver doesn't always have to be an elderly, a grown-up person. It can be little children who are also acting as the caregivers. And doing this process of caregiving can result in what we call compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue. That you couldn't be bothered anymore. Khana khaya, nahi khaya, you really couldn't be bothered. Till about last week, you used to cajole ki khalo. And now, nahi khayenge, to koi baat nahi. You just take the plate away. You can't be bothered anymore. There is basically a diminished emotional energy needed to care for patients or others. So what are the symptoms? How do you recognize compassion fatigue? There could be episodes of hyperarousal, that is disturbs, you can't go to sleep, you are very irritable, small things, somebody says a joke and you suddenly get angry, right? Avoidance, you start avoiding that very job which you like, and re-experiencing. Suppose you're sitting down, in the morning in the office, your boss has had a fight with you and you were insulted. So in the evening when you're sitting at home with your tumbler of whiskey, and suddenly those thoughts come back to your mind, and there is a sudden outburst of anger within you, and then in that outburst you actually throw away your glass of whiskey or whatever it is. I recommend that you should not waste whiskey. So caregiving, the various aspects of caregiving, the caregiving roles in this mentally challenged child, the mother as the caregiver. Here again, this is a single mother with a, again, physically and mentally challenged child. Since birth, this child has had a tracheostomy and a feeding gastrostomy, and now this child would be at least 12 years of age, and a single mother bringing up this child, it is a challenge. Believe me, it's a challenge. And but every challenge has its own rewards. You would be rewarded by little things, like that little smile, or when you get back home, you know the child reaches out for you, right? So those little things, unconditional love, which you get from such, I call them heavenly children, or even from the lesser beings like your pets, because they would love you whatever, in spite of however you look, whatever, whether you give them anything or not, they would love you anyway. And that is unconditional love, and that is what we need to have within us, unconditional love, because those children or those pets in the family, those are your gurus. You need to learn from them the art of unconditional love. It is often that during periods of intense physical and psychological suffering that an individual takes recourse to religion and spirituality. We all do, isn't it? In our deepest crisis, we take recourse to religion, because we understand that both are always here. If you're religious, you'll take recourse to religion. If you're not religious, spirituality, like nature, right? In the background you can hear the chirping of the birds, the sound of the birds, right? So you need to experience everything, nature, and when you resonate with the vibrations of nature, you become complete. This is not a small temple. You know what this is? This is one of the greatest and most modernly equipped high-tech research laboratories in the world, right? Because this is where most of us go for research work in times of suffering. Whenever we suffer, we go to such research centers and sit and contemplate as to what is the cause of our suffering. So these are research centers. It doesn't always have to be a temple. It could be a masjid, it could be a church, it could be a gurudwara, it could be any place. But remember, the next time you enter any religious place, view it as a center of research, a center of contemplation, and your viewpoints will change. And as I said, suffering seeks validation to blossom positively. You need to validate anybody's suffering. Your own suffering, if you are suffering, your suffering also has to be validated by others. Only you will get that satisfaction only when others sort of recognize your suffering. It has to be validated. So caregiving has many benefits also. It can help reconnect or strengthen a relationship. It can be personally rewarding. Yeah, right. It can help boost your self-esteem. You feel that कुछ तो कर रहा हूँ मैं अपने पिताजी या माँ के लिए, कुछ तो कर पा रहा हूँ, कुछ तो सेवा कर रहा हूँ. So that is a very good thing, and allows care recipient to enjoy individualized attention at home. So the patient also definitely is benefited. Nobody, as I said, nobody wants to die in a hospital, given a choice. Everybody would want to die at home. You know why? Because you would get the caregiving process. The caregiving process is not just a physical process. It is a holistic thing. Here there's the father-in-law and daughter-in-law. They had a bad relationship when the father-in-law used to be hale and hearty. But when he was diagnosed with cancer and he became bedbound, it was his daughter-in-law who became the main caregiver. And the relationship changed at that time. It became more of a father-daughter sort of relationship. And then there is something called reconcile life perspective. Say I have been diagnosed with cancer, right? And then I would pray to God and say, why me? Why did I have to have cancer? I have never done anything wrong in my life. Why मैं क्यों? And then you might sit and reflect when you go to those little centers of research which I talked about, and then you might think that हाँ मैंने भी तो अपने बाप माँ का ख्याल नहीं रखा इसीलिए मुझे हो गया, या मैंने तो पूजा पाठ कभी नहीं किया इसीलिए मुझे कैंसर हो गया. So those sort of things. So basically the extent to which individuals have reconciled their spiritual and religious beliefs and practices with adverse events in their lives, which reflects the connection between religion, spirituality and well-being. So everything is interconnected. And then there is something called the butterfly effect of caring. You have to learn to be sensitive, non-judgmental and respectful towards yourself, and only you can be the same towards others. So the first requisite of love is to fill up your own glass with love, and only then you can pour out that love to others, isn't it? If you have no love, if you just have anger within, how can you learn to love others? So the primary requirement is to learn to love yourself. And do you really do that? Do you really love yourself? So if you ever have time, do come to our center at Koshish, where we do conduct retreat sessions, where we teach you. We really don't have to teach you, it is, you know that. We help you to realize the fact that you're a lovely person and to fill your glass up with love. Now religion can influence caregiver distress, because every religion has a moral code of conduct, every religion says, yeah, you should look after your parents, you should look after the weak and the injured and so on. So there is a moral code. It can influence the way individuals evaluate, restore and preserve the quality of relationships with others. Like, yeah, you should respect your father, you should, your children should respect you, and so on and so forth. And studies have shown that people who are religious have lesser rates of divorce, higher rates of marital harmony actually. And then there is self-compassion. As I said, you need to fill up your own glass. So self-compassion, again, it's a big topic by itself. So it's a basic kindness with a deep awareness of the suffering of oneself, first oneself and others. So you are also suffering and others are suffering. As I told you, that example of that woman who gave the 10 rupee note to the beggar. So that was basically demonstration of self-compassion. And mindfulness, bringing your mind, your crazy mind, to stay in focus. So early mornings when I go out for my morning walks, there's a small wood adjoining my house, quite deep woods, I would say. So whenever I start the walk, my mind is usually thinking of multiple things. But then the art is in focusing your mind, bringing it back to ground zero, and then directing its attention to things. Like I focus on nature, I look at plants, the birds, the road, right? So how you can bring your mind back to ground zero and help it focus on something specific and find a sense of meaning out of it. So that is basically mindfulness. So as I said, during the process of caregiving, the whole family is basically involved. See, the whole family is involved in the caregiving process. So the way forward is to realize that the caregiver is as important as the patient. The caregiver often endures more suffering than the patient. You need to acknowledge the effort put in by the caregiver. You need to listen, not speak too much as I am doing right now. You need to listen to them. Listening should not be a false listening. It should be an active, empathetic listening. You need to support and encourage them. Then there is something called respite care. As I said, if you are free on a Sunday or whichever day, of the week, if you can spare 3 hours, you go to such a household where there is a caregiver and you buy him a ticket to a cinema hall or say something of that sort, and say, you just go and enjoy a movie for 3 hours, I'll take care of your patient. That means a lot. So that is called respite care. And then of course there are psychological interventions. Well, I think I'll end my talk here, and I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you.